Today we're going to work with quadratic functions in the vertex form. So see the equation in the blue? This equation right here is called the vertex form. Now this equation, y is equal to 2, bracket x minus 3, close bracket squared, minus 5 is called the vertex form. Now why is this called the vertex form? Let me show you. So this is what the graph of this equation looks like. Now the vertex on this graph is where the two lines meet together, which would be right over here at the dot. So this dot is the vertex. Now let's find the value of the vertex. So we always write the x value first, which happens to be 3. And let's find the y value of this vertex, which comes second, which is negative 5, close bracket. So that's the vertex. Well, you can actually find the vertex by just looking at the equation. Let me show you how to do that. Now to find the vertex, what you're going to do is you're going to find the x value first, which is inside the bracket, except you switch the signs. So the x value for this is positive 3, not negative 3. Now to find the y value, you look at this number, negative 5, that's on its own. So that right there is the y value of your vertex. Okay, so that's how you find the value of the vertex. Now let's see if we can find the axis of symmetry. Now on the graph, this green line right here is the axis of symmetry, where it cuts it in half. And that always happens to be an x value. So in this case, the x value for axis of symmetry is at 3. And notice you can also find it on the x value of the vertex. So the axis of symmetry in our case happens to be positive 3. Now let's see if we can find the max or the min value just by looking at the equation. Well, first let's look at the graph. Notice our graph, it's right side up, meaning it's a minimum, because the vertex is at the lowest point, meaning the minimum point on the graph. So right off the bat, we know it's a minimum. Now, how do we actually find the minimum value? Let's look at our graph first. Notice here is the y value of our minimum. So we're going to write y is equal to negative 5. But if we didn't have the graph, what we can do is we can just find the y value of our vertex, and that also happens to be our minimum value. So let's look at some more examples to fully understand this. So here is a formula in the vertex form, and we're going to start out by finding the vertex. So let's do that first. Now remember, vertex has an x and a y value. The x value can be found inside of the bracket. But remember, you've got to switch it up, so you have to switch the sign. So our x value for the vertex is positive 2. Now, you might be wondering, why is it positive 2 and not negative 2? Remember, when we have this negative 2 inside the bracket, that basically means you're moving to the right. And when you're moving to the right, you're moving towards the positive side of the graph, which is why we have to switch the signs, okay? All right, so now that we've found the x value of the vertex, let's find the y. Now the y value is this number right here, the positive 4. So that number by itself, or your k value, is the y value of your vertex, and that stays as it is. Okay, now that we've found the vertex, let's find the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is where you can put that line in the middle of the graph and both sides are symmetrical at that point. And that's always an x value. Now to find that, just find the x value of vertex, so that's your axis of symmetry, which is positive 2. Or if you didn't have the vertex, remember, look at your formula, and that 2 right there will help you find the axis of symmetry, except you have to switch the sign. So again, axis of symmetry is positive 2. All right, now let's find the max or min value. Now, if you look at your formula, notice there's a negative sign right here in front of the bracket. Remember, that tells you that there's a reflection in the x-axis, meaning your graph is going to be upside down. So when it's upside down, it's going to look like this. And if you remember, that is called a max. Now the reason why it's max is because the vertex, meaning that dot right there, is at the maximum point on the graph. So we know it's a max, let's circle that in. Now to find the max value, it's a y value, and you can find it by just looking at your vertex. So the y value of the vertex, which is positive 4, is also your max value. Or you can look at the formula, and this positive 4 by itself is also your max value. So let's write that. Our max value is y is equal to positive 4. Okay, now that we found these things, let's actually sketch our graph. Now, please keep in mind, this is a rough sketch. It's not exact. We'll do the exact graph some other time. Now we are going to start out by first plotting our vertex. So the x value for vertex was positive 2, y was positive 4. So let's start at the x, so positive 2 is here. And from here, we're going to go all the way to y value, which is at 4. So this dot right here is our vertex. Now from here, we're going to make our graph. Now remember that negative means it was upside down, and that 0.5 means it's a shrink, meaning our graph is going to be wider than usual. So let's try to draw that. So from the vertex, I'm going to draw two lines that are upside down, and I'm going to make sure I make it a little bit wider than usual. And this right here is my graph. Now again, please keep in mind this is not exact, okay? It's just a rough sketch. So on your homework today, I want to see, can you find the right vertex? Can you tell me whether it's right side up or upside down? And tell me whether it's going to be narrow or wide. Now here is another question, and we're going to start out by finding the vertex. So let's start out by finding the x value of the vertex, which is inside the bracket. But remember, you've got to switch the sign, because here that means you're moving left, meaning it's negative. So our x value is negative 5. Now the y value of the vertex is right over here, just a plain negative 2, so that one doesn't change. Now that we have the coordinates of our vertex, let's find the axis of symmetry. Now for the axis of symmetry, that's an x value, which you can find by looking at your vertex. So this x value is also your axis of symmetry, which happens to be negative 5. Or remember, you can just look at the formula and don't forget to switch the sign. All right, so now that we have our axis of symmetry, let's find our max or min value. Now let's figure out if it's either max or min. So notice this number 5, meaning your a value, it doesn't have a sign next to it, meaning it's actually positive. So our graph is going to be right side up, meaning that's actually going to be a min value. Now the reason why that's a min is because the vertex is at the minimum point of the graph. So let's circle the min. So here we're going to have a min value. And to find the actual value, just look at the y value of your vertex. So y is equal to, in this case, it happens to be negative 2. So we're going to write that here. Our min value is negative 2. Or just look at the formula as well, and this negative 2 is also your min value. Now that we found all those values, let's sketch the graph. So always start out by plotting the vertex. In our case, our vertex was x negative 5, y negative 2. So x negative 5 is here, and then we're going to negative 2, and this dot right here is our vertex. Now, remember, our graph is actually a min. This is a positive 5, so it's going to be right side up, and because it's a bigger number, it's going to be stretched or narrow. So from the vertex, I'm going to draw two lines that are right side up, and I'm going to try to make them a bit narrow. And right here is my sketch. Again, keep in mind, this is not exact, it's just a sketch. In this question, again, we're going to start out by finding the vertex. So let's start off with the x value, which is inside the bracket, but don't forget to switch the sign. So your x value is going to be a positive 2. Now, why are we switching the signs? Remember, that negative 2 means you're moving towards the right side of the graph, meaning to the more positive side. So that's why we've got to switch the signs. Now let's find the y value of the vertex. But notice there's no number here by itself. So what is going to be our y value? When there's no number, it's actually a 0. So keep that in mind. So the y value of our vertex is actually a 0. Okay, now that we've found the vertex, let's move on to the axis of symmetry. Now the axis of symmetry is an x value, so let's start out by writing x is equal to, and you can find that for the x value of your vertex. So our axis of symmetry is also just a positive 2. Or again, look at your formula and just switch the sign that's inside the bracket. All right, so axis of symmetry is done. Now let's move on to the max or min. Now look in front of the bracket. Notice again there's no sign here. That means it's actually a positive sign, meaning our graph is going to be right side up. So that's going to be actually a min. So let's circle the min. Now to find the actual value, you remember it's a y value. And you can find it in the y value of your vertex. So that right there is your min value. Or again, if you look at your formula, because there's nothing here, your min value is 0. So let's write that y is equal to 0. Now let's start with sketching. So always start out by plotting your vertex, which is x is at 2 and y is going to be right here at 0. So this right here is our vertex. Now if you look at your formula, there's no negative, so it's going to be right side up, and there's no number in front of the bracket, so it's just going to be a normal U-shaped parabola. Okay, it's not stretching or becoming wide. So this right here is our graph. All right, last question. So again, start out by finding the vertex. And the x value of the vertex, well, wait a minute. We don't have any brackets. Now, that's where you normally find your x value. In this case, because we don't have any brackets, your x value for the vertex is 0. So let's write that down. So x value is 0 for the vertex. Now the y value is just this positive 3, meaning your k value that's by itself. So we have the y value, so let's write that down, which is 3, close bracket. Now let's find the axis of symmetry. So axis of symmetry is an x value, so x is equal to, and it's going to be the x value of your vertex. So x is equal to 0. Or remember, because we don't have any brackets, axis of symmetry is 0. All right, so now let's move on to the max or min value. Now notice in front of the 12x squared, we have a negative, meaning our graph is going to have a reflection in the x-axis, meaning it's upside down. Okay, so because it's upside down, it's going to look like this, and that's always considered a max, because the vertex of that graph right there is at the maximum or the highest point. So let's circle the max. Okay, now let's write the actual value. So y is equal to, again, you can just look at the y value of your vertex. That is your max value. Or this positive 3 also is just your max value. So our max value is y is equal to positive 3. All right, now let's move on to sketching. So start out by plotting your vertex, which in our case is 0 and positive 3. So x value 0 is here, and we're going to go all the way to positive 3. Okay, so that big dot right there is our vertex. Now, again, look at the formula. That negative tells you it's upside down. And this 12, because it's quite a large number, tells you that we're going to have a vertical stretch, meaning it's actually going to be a narrow graph. So from the vertex, that dot, I'm going to make an upside down narrow graph. So kind of like this. And our question is finished.